Hello, I'm Bob Kaiserman, the National Library of Patient Rights and Advocacy. Today, I have a very special guest. Sueann Kenney Noziska, MSW, LCSW, RPS, is a licensed clinical social worker and registered play therapist supervisor specializing in clinical practice with abused, maltreated, and traumatized children, adolescents, and their families. She has over 25 years of clinical experience. She owns and operates her own private practice and is part of her community as a member of the multidisciplinary team on child abuse. Sueann serves on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's Family Advocacy and Outreach Network and the Association for Play Therapy's Foundation Board of Directors. She is the former clinical director of Dona Ana County Children Advocacy Center. And additionally, she has served as an adjunct faculty member at New Mexico State University and the University of California, San Diego. Sueann is internationally recognized for her work consistently presenting at several major child abuse and maltreatment conferences throughout the United States, and she has presented across the globe, including places such as Japan, China, Jamaica, Estonia, and England. She has developed many trauma-informed interventions for clinical work with abused and traumatized children and adolescents. She is a contributing author to multiple publications and has testified as an expert witness in child abuse and trauma at both the state and federal levels. Sueann serves on the National Board of Directors for the Association for Play Therapy, the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect's Working Group on Child Sexual Victimization, Exploitation, and Trafficking, and she has participated in the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children's Mental Health Section Group. It is my pleasure to welcome Sueann Kenney Noziska. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We noticed at the conference that you focused on, and your work focuses on, at-risk children. So your impressive work with at-risk children and their families includes working with children who have been victimized through sexual abuse. So please share with our audience how you use CBPT to work with those children.
Right. So cognitive behavioral play therapy, CBPT, actually has a very natural link, in my opinion, with the treatment of victims of sexual abuse. So, among other things, in the beginning stages of treatment with victims, we start with things like emotional expression, coping strategies, strengthening support, and psychoeducation. But contrary to what people think, when people come in for their therapy, we're not like, oh, here's some dolls, show us what happened. Like, you would not do any of that in the beginning. So we want to build up coping strategies and increase that client or that victim's sense of social support and give them information about what's happened to them that's accurate. So cognitive behavioral play therapy lets us do these sort of elements of trauma treatment. We're able to do interventions that help kids talk about feelings related to sexual abuse. So things like scared or worried or feeling guilty, feeling like it's their fault. We also can use CBPT to build up coping strategies. So we want kids to be able to manage the stressors that they're dealing with. So we might use puppets to help kids practice progressive muscle relaxation or deep breathing, or even cognitive strategies that they can tell themselves about the sexual abuse that can help them manage what they're dealing with. Another really important piece of that early on work is the psychoeducation. So that's giving not just the victim information about sexual abuse, but non-offending parents or other adults in the family. Sadly, even though sexual abuse is widespread, people just don't have accurate information on it. There's lots of myths and misperceptions. So kids are sexually abused by strangers. I would know a sex offender if I saw them. Sexual abuse only happens in poor families. If sexual abuse were to happen, a victim would tell right away. So those are all misperceptions that families and victims often have. So again, with cognitive behavioral play therapy, we can give them accurate information. Stranger danger is a myth. 90% of childhood sexual abuse happens at the hands of someone that victim knows and trusts, which means it's also someone known and trusted by the family, right? Delayed disclosure is the hallmark of what we expect with childhood sexual abuse, meaning victims don't run out of the room screaming, "Oh my God, he touched me." That's not how it works. So kids are groomed, victims are groomed to be used to increasingly more physically and sexually abusive content. So a delayed disclosure, meaning there's a lag time between the sexual abuse and when it's disclosed, is very common. Sex offenders look like every other normal person. They're not homeless people that are felons that already are on the sex offender registry. So again, cognitive behavioral play therapy allows us a developmentally appropriate way to provide that accurate information. So we've got emotional expression, psychoeducation, and coping strategies in the beginning phase of treatment that are well suited for CBPT interventions. And then the working phase of treatments where we really work on share with me what you remember about your trauma, in this case, childhood sexual abuse. So that's where we start to invite kids and adolescents to share their memories about what's happened so they can make meaning and become desensitized to triggers. So in my opinion, and being someone who's used cognitive behavioral play therapy for over 2 decades, there's just sort of a natural fit for using that treatment modality with victims of childhood sexual abuse.
I'm curious to know, in this particular setting, how does a child arrive in your office? If in fact sexual abuse may take place in the house, is it suspected in some cases, or is it always, it's after the fact that it's been proven, and now they bring the child to your?
So that's a really good question. We don't put kids in therapy to find out what happened to them. So if someone suspects childhood sexual abuse, a report needs to be filed. We don't put kids in treatment till they make a disclosure, because if this child or adolescent's not a victim, what does that mean? They stay in treatment for forever because they didn't make a disclosure. Usually I'll get cases, well, 2 main sources. I'll get cases at the front end of a disclosure. So it could be law enforcement that refers them to my office. It could be the district attorney's office. It could be Child Protective Services, or it could be the family themselves, a non-protecting parent calling me saying, "This happened to my child and I need them to get into therapy." So that's one sort of gateway of people accessing services. The other thing I commonly see is kids or teens who have been sexually abused in earlier periods of their life are starting to have struggles because of that trauma of sexual abuse. And at that point, I may get a phone call from a referring agency, or again, a non-offending parent saying, "I think my child needs help to deal with their trauma." So those are the 2 main sort of gateways, as I said, to getting kids into treatment.
I think what you do is fascinating, and I admire very much the work that you do.
Thank
My
you.
name
It is a
is
labor
going.
of love. I have to say, it is a labor of love. There's days where I'm like, oh, this is so stressful. And other days where I'm like, I've got this, right? And it is much needed. With childhood sexual abuse, there's usually an intergenerational pattern, which means when I have a victim in my office, child, youth, adolescent, it doesn't take too much to get another person in the family tree that's also been sexually abused. One of the ways that we can address that intergenerational trauma piece is getting kids, youth, and adolescents connected to treatment, and not just general treatment.
Right.
Treatment that's trauma specific. And again, that's where cognitive behavioral play therapy, because it is directive, because it is supported by research, because it is developmentally appropriate, and we can tailor it to address the trauma. That's where that natural fit is. And I would argue that until we actually have some formal intervention, that intergenerational pattern of sexual abuse usually repeats itself.
What is the oldest patient that you'd be treating with using CBPT?
I use it with kids and I use it with teenagers. So originally, cognitive behavioral play therapy was designed as a short-term intervention for younger children and youth. But our more contemporary approaches of CBPT include longer term treatment that can also be geared at middle school kids and adolescents as well. So I've used it with kids all the way from kindergarten or even younger than that up to high school graduation.
Very, very interesting. Is there anything you want to leave with your colleagues as we conclude the interview about your work?
So many things. I guess the big takeaway would be if you're working with this population of victims of childhood sexual abuse, you absolutely need ongoing continuing ed specific to childhood sexual abuse. These cases are not cases for a general practitioner that sort of focuses on mental health in general. They are geared to professionals who are trauma informed and understand childhood sexual abuse and its impact. So I would encourage other clinicians to get that specialized training so that they're more likely to do good instead of doing harm with their interventions.
Thank you so much for being my guest today. I really appreciate it. And I know the information that you provided will be appreciated by those watching. I'm Bob Kaiserman. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next interview.